if we work together as pet parent and longevity specialist veterinarian, I think that we can increase our dogs' lifespans by up to 25 to 30% beyond what their genetics would tell you. I've been in veterinary practice for 40 years. I graduated back in 1986 and have spent the last 4 decades in small animal practice predominantly, usually in Northern California or in Colorado. And about 15 years ago, I developed a real passion around the care of older pets. And so when I had the opportunity to do it, I moved into a specialty practice. And I can honestly say, Chuck, that to the best of my knowledge, I'm the only veterinarian in the United States dealing specifically with pet longevity or how to help your pets live their longest and best life on a daily basis.
I want to say thank you on that first part because of a lot of people, we love our pets and our animals, and there's a lot of people who want to adopt, but they I'm going to go on my soapbox for a second. I don't like it when they specialty order for the designer dogs and that kind of stuff. But there are so many senior dogs or older adult dogs that are left behind because they're not the cutesy cutesy. But a lot of
Yeah.
people don't realize that they've already been through all the potty kind of stuff, and they have love to give as well. So thank you very much for really.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, let me tell you one of the primary reasons that I kind of got into the old dog game, Chuck, and that was because about 15 years ago, I had a really good client, a really good pet parent, and her name was Rose. And she was a little bit older, and she had just a lovely little Cavalier King Charles Spaniel named Phoebe. And they were both some of my very favorite folks to walk into a veterinary clinic. Well, as it turns out, Rose had cancer and she died. And she hadn't really made plans for Phoebe, who was 11 years old herself. And she was a deaf dog. She had heart problems, as many Cavalier King Charles Spaniels do, and needed some dental work. And so nobody in the, or let me rephrase that, very few people, Chuck, would have adopted her out of a shelter setting. And that just tore my heart up because the reality is that, gosh, I'm 66 at this point, and so I'm a little bit familiar with the aches and pains that accompany old age, and the risks, the health threats that old dogs have. And the last thing in the world that they need is to be kicked out of their house when a caregiver, when a pet parent dies or has to go to an assisted living facility and be run through a shelter setting. So to make short work of this, I ended up adopting Phoebe, and she lived the last 4 years of her life with me. But it really opened my eyes to the needs of these older dogs, not just in terms of veterinary care, but also in terms of ensuring that there's a continuity of care for them as their pet parents get older. And so recently I had the chance to chat with another podcast host who is actually an attorney who does nothing else, Chuck, other than develop trusts to take care of your pets after you and I die. And you
Mm.
talk about a specialized niche, but the reality is this is important for us, Chuck. I mean, every pet should live longer than they do, but especially these older pets. They deserve the very best in care.
Dogs should live longer than what they do, and I want to get into that part a little bit later. But there are folks when they pass away, they have a dog that's an adult dog, a senior dog, and there's nobody there to care for them after they're gone. And I do believe that we do have to make arrangements for that. And I personally have been thinking about that as well. And part of that for me is setting up something financial for whoever is going to care for my dog, because I do
Yeah.
know that people are like, "Oh, I'll do it," but when it comes right down to it, unless there's something in it for them,
Right.
chances aren't likely. They'll take it for 6 months and they go, it's time to put the dog down. A
Yeah.
dog is a life.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it does take both a commitment and financial resources to really care for a pet. And so you're exactly right, Chuck, in thinking of it. And my hat is off to you because not too many folks do. The reality is that these conversations are rare.
Yeah, they are. Um, if we could jump into, one of the first things that we kind of hit on is longevity and health of the care for these pets. So I'd like to, skip the puppy phase, go to the adult and the little bit senior. As you said, you're 66. I'm right up there with you. we kind of know what it's about taking care of ourselves, and dogs depend on us to take care of them. They're always a 2-year-old. Doesn't matter if they're 10 or 12. They're always a
Yeah.
2-year-old the way I see it. They
Yeah.
can't open the door. They can't do this. We got to do it for them.
Sure, sure. So yeah, I would tell you that in my mind, Chuck, I think the science tells us that you and I, if we work together as pet parent and longevity specialist veterinarian, I think that we can increase our dogs' lifespans by up to 25 to 30% beyond what their genetics would tell you. And for many dogs, that's well over a year, 1 to 2 years without any problem. And, I would perhaps differ with you when you're saying, let's just deal with, yeah, or let's concentrate on the older pet, because just like for you and me, lifestyle habits, our health starts early, Chuck. And I mean, you're still a young man, but the reality is that, we look at diet, we look at lifestyle, we look at supplements, we look at medical care, we look at prescription longevity drugs, and every one of those has an analog in the work that I do. And so many people come to me and say, listen, Kevin, I just want prescription longevity drugs to help my pet live longer. And listen, and honestly, Chuck, I'm okay with that. I mean, but it's a very good way to spend 100 or 200 or sometimes even a little bit more in the way of dollars per month. What if I told you, though, that one of the simplest ways to help increase our pet's longevity would actually save you money? And that's because in every species studied to date, Chuck, whether you're dealing with fish or elephants or zebras or dogs or cats or humans, the one mechanism that has been proven to extend life in every species studied to date is calorie restriction,
Mm,
simply eating less. And so, as an example, in my line of work, the Purina Dog Food Company about 15 years ago did a study, Chuck, where they took litters of Labrador Retriever puppies and they divided them in half so that if you had a litter of 8 pups, four of them went one way, four of them went the other. One branch of that study gave the dogs as much as they wanted to eat every day, all day long. And the other branch of that study fed them only about 3/4 of what the calculation said that they should get on a body weight basis. And then they followed these dogs, over the course of their lives. Same feed, just different quantities. Same people taking care of them, same houses, etc. And what they found, Chuck, is that the thinner dogs lived 1.8 years longer than the
wow.
fatter dogs did without any other change whatsoever. So listen, guys, I'm fine with accepting your money for these fancy prescription longevity drugs, but Chuck, what I'm going to tell you is that diet and lifestyle can make a huge difference for these pets in terms of how long they live without spending any money at all.
Yeah, I'm gonna play pretend veterinarian and
Okay.
psychiatrist, psychologist for dogs, and say I think too. At least I noticed with my dog, part of this is their happiness, health, their mental health, and that means being active with them, paying attention,
Good.
and taking them for a walk. I think at least again for my dog and I, it seems like that gives them energy or the will to be happy and live longer. Maybe.
Gives us both energy, man. Gives us both
Yes.
energy.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Uh, the other thing too that I wanted to ask is, and make a comment, like you're talking about, as far as the calorie restriction. I mean, we feel guilty when we feed our dog that little bit, and then the dog looks at us, and we're going, well, okay. And then we take our table scraps, or we give them a little bit more. We shouldn't fall into that guilt, right? The dog is not going to hate you for not giving him some extra scraps.
No, and listen, I mean, uh, I, I freely admit, Chuck, I fall into the same category. I have a little 18-month-old golden retriever puppy named Annabelle who just went downstairs and let herself out. But the honest truth is, I'm going to take a step back from her and I'll circle right back around. Because the dog aging project, Chuck, there's this big nationwide study right now that's going on. It's testing one of the prescription longevity drugs that I use to help pets live longer. But as a side note, what they found, Chuck, they're about 4 years into a 10-year long study, and they found quite clearly early in the game that dogs fed one time a day had fewer health issues than dogs fed 2 or 3 or 4 times a day.
Ah.
Just one time a day, Chuck, was the very healthiest way for us to feed our pets. Now I'm going to circle back around to my little puppy Annabelle because she is food motivated. And so, although I in my brain understand that once daily feeding is probably optimal for her, I feed her twice daily because she takes such great pleasure, Chuck, in those meals. But that segues into a second component for us, and that is, what do we feed our dogs? Here's another thing where I have to raise my hand and say, "Geez, Chuck, I I made mistakes during the 50 or 55 years that I've had dogs, and one of those mistakes was feeding my dogs kibbles." Now, listen, kibbles are cheap. I fully understand that. Kibbles are convenient. Absolutely understand that. But about 10 years ago, there were several studies that came out, Chuck, that tells us that the average kibble diet is not a very healthy approach to feeding our dogs. Why? Because every one of those kibbles, every one of those individual kibbles, Chuck, is held together with extra sugars or extra starches. And then you pass those kibbles through an oven, 450 or 500 degrees temperature, and those sugars in there actually, a percentage of them develop into little carcinogens called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. And so the combination of that increased sugar content with the high temperature processing really tells us that a kibble diet is not the very healthiest way to feed our pets. And so with Annabelle as an example, now listen, I'm partially retired, so I acknowledge that I have the luxury of time, but I home cook for her. And I can talk more about the recipe, but here's what's kind of interesting, Chuck. Golden retrievers, like my dog Annabelle, have up to about a 5 times higher cancer incidence than does the average dog. And so, although I rotate her ingredients around, every meal that she gets, Chuck, has broccoli in it. Why? Because A, it is a good source of fiber for her, but B, broccoli contains a specific ingredient that fights cancer. And so we all have to just kind of think not just about how much we're feeding our dog, but also what we're feeding our dog.
Mm-hmm. Uh, 100% agree. And I was guilty about the kibble early
Yeah,
on. I
I
you
understand.
see these commercials how we did this and it tastes good and
Yeah,
we've added all these nutrients. But now I've seen of late, more and more about the science behind kibble, the
yeah,
overheating, the spray on the taste, and we'll
right.
spray back on some of the nutritional things. And like I said, the
Yeah.
carcinogens. I think a lot of us as humans have learned over the years that burning our hot dogs and burgers might taste good, but it's carcinogens. It's the
No
same with the
argument. No argument. I agree 100%.
I personally, with my dog now, since been off of kibbles for years, but we're over to freeze dried.
Hmm.
Um, he likes that. We did the air dry, but then freeze dried is much better for him. I tried broccoli. He just kind of
You didn't
scoots
go
it
for
over.
it? I understand.
We do blueberries. We make it into
Okay.
a game. We'll throw it,
Blueberries,
and
great choice. Great choice for
he
all of us.
yeah, and he watches me eat one. I throw one to him. I eat one.
There you go.
So we make
Perfect.
it a game. But as you're saying, the nutrition is so important for our pets, and we shouldn't skimp um, on that nutritional value.
Yeah,
I think for our
and
dogs.
and and listen, it's easy, Chuck, for me to get up on my high horse and say, well, you should do this or you should do that. And for many folks, kibbles are the only way that they can feed their dog. But what I'm going to suggest to you then is use the best brand, use the highest quality brand you can find, and maybe in a perfect world, add the vegetables, add the blueberries that Chuck has spoken of to your pet's diet. Maybe reduce the quantity of those kibbles from, let's say if your standard meal size is 100 kibbles, reduce that kibble ration down to 60 or 70 in an effort to help your pet maintain a healthy body weight. But then that gives you the latitude, the space to go ahead and add some fresh chicken or add some vegetables or add some blueberries or fruits in there. And that the combination of those things will give them a healthier diet, Chuck. We don't have to spend an awful lot of money on this, but just recognize it. It's very simple, just like humans, the closer you and I can get to the source, to the farm, to the area where the beef or the turkeys or whatever the fish are in our diets, the healthier we will eat and the healthier our dogs will eat as well.
I've got to ask you this because I'm not guilty of this, but I do see so many people do it where they say, "Well, I feed them steak or whatever it is," but they feed them steak that's been seasoned like crazy. So, like me, my boy has eaten better than I have this week. He's had ribeye mixed with his stuff. I haven't this entire for the past 5 days. Um, so I guess my real question is, don't feed or we shouldn't feed any type of seasoned stuff if we're saying, well, I don't want to eat the rest of my food. I'm going to give it to him. It's already got the
Well,
barbecue sauce. It's got this. Is that really bad?
no, I think you're doing better than you think, Chuck. The reality
Okay.
is that if you and I are thinking about adding a little garlic to our meat, or small quantities of salt or some pepper, all those things are fine. The reality
Okay.
is that, listen, a percentage of dogs, a percentage of cats do run into high blood pressure, but they're not as likely to run into problems with it because their physiology is just a little bit different. But here's the thing that I would encourage your listeners to think about, and that is the preservatives that go into treats or onto the treats that they might buy at Chewy or PetSmart or their local pet store, because many of those are applied months in advance. And the reality is that many of those are bad for pets. And so if you're going to buy treats for your pets, far and away the healthiest approach is to find something, as Chuck suggested, that doesn't have much in the way of preserves, that doesn't have much in the way of flavoring on it. And that's going to be the healthiest way for you to offer your dog treats.
Okay. Circling back a little bit more about how often for feeding and things like that. Um, for me, and I believe maybe a lot of people might read the label and it'll say 1.5 cups for your dog weight for this per day. And then I've done this because I thought, I eat twice a day only now. My dog looks at me, so I'll cut it. But when we cut it, this is my belief. People tend to say, okay, I'll cut that 1.5 and, we'll do it. But then they kind of fudge a little extra
Yeah,
because that
that's
half is
fair.
always hard to get when you're scooping.
Yeah.
We really need to watch out for that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll make a couple of points, and that is, if at some point, Chuck, you and I open the Chuck and Kevin dog food store, would we tell our clients to feed actually the scientific amount, or would we cheat that up a little bit in the hopes of making just a little bit more money for the Chuck and Kevin dog food store? I think the latter is true. And then the other approach is that if you are worried about the quantity of food, if you feel in your heart like your little dog, there's just no way that they can survive on the quantity of food that you're giving them, please just go ahead and do that division 5 or 10 minutes before they eat, and then add some water to their meal, Chuck. Because if
Mhm.
you're using kibbles, those kibbles will generally soak up water and take a kibble that starts like this size and make it that size. And and if you're using a canned diet, just simply diluting it down in water will help your pet feel more satisfied. It's no different at all than when I'm trying to lose weight or maintain my weight, Chuck. I'm going to do a better job of it if I drink a glass of water, a full glass of water, before I consume my meal, because it'll just help to fill me up. And who doesn't need more water?
That's right. Yeah. We are both pets and us made up a lot of waters in our body.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
before before we get too much more deeper into this conversation, I want to make sure that the folks know where they can find you, what literature that you may have available. Can you let us know about that?
Absolutely. I really have two primary websites, Chuck, and thank you very much for that opportunity. The first of my websites is www.helpingpetslivelonger.com. That's it, helpingpetslivelonger.com. And that's where my team and I work 7 days a week to do just exactly that, using a combination of concierge consults. So I do a lot of telemedicine work with clients from California to New York to Alaska to Hawaii and back again. And then I also we advise people on the very best tests, when to use your veterinarian for things, and when not to use your veterinarian, when your veterinarian's guidance can actually sometimes be in error. And I can talk more about that in a minute or two, Chuck. And then supplements and prescription longevity drugs. So I'll circle back around to what I really consider the best practice in longevity science in a few minutes here. But the other thing, in addition to my helpingpetslivelonger.com website, I've got a simple website for your listeners, www.freevetcall.com. And Chuck, that is just simply a link to my Zoom calendar where any one of your clients can pencil in a time and a date that works best for them, and we will sit and visit for 10 or 15 minutes on the subject of their choice without any expense. We're all in this together, Chuck, and I will help your listeners with their pet health questions if I can.
Wow. Thank you for doing that. Thank you very much. So, all right, it's time to circle around to that to the science of this that you just mentioned. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk. I'll give you a general outline, Chuck, and then we'll see where the conversation goes.
all
Because
right.
again, people, it's just human nature, Chuck. You want to take the shortcut. You want the easy route to, for instance, weight loss. So why wouldn't you and I take something like Wegovy or one of these other GLP-1 agonists instead of going to the gym and sweating for an hour? But the reality is that if you and I cheat in our life, and for that matter in our pets' lives, by just using prescription drugs, sometimes it's not going to be as effective, Chuck, as if you and I look at the whole package. And so when I look at longevity science, when I look at how best to improve the lifespan of the pets in my care, I really think of it as a four-legged chair is what I'm trying to say. One is the diet and lifestyle that we've already talked about. The second is the veterinary care that I've talked about, things that actually make sense for an individual pet. Because as you and I were talking about online, what would serve your dog best is totally different than the veterinary care that my little 18-month-old golden retriever puppy might need. And so veterinary care, just like human medical care, ought to be very custom, Chuck, very individualized. So that's leg two. And then leg three are supplements. And I'm going to say this tongue in cheek, but you may not know, Chuck, how much bullshit there is in the human or the veterinary supplement market. But take my word for it, there's a bunch. And so the key is there are supplements that will benefit your pets, that will benefit your health, but not as many as marketing would have you believe. For instance, glucosamine and chondroitin, the thing that I've sold for 20 years in my veterinary practice to help pets' joints, has recently been shown not to work at all, Chuck. Not to work in humans, not to work in dogs, doesn't have any benefit at all for our painful joints. But there are supplements that do. And so
Okay.
that's leg number three. And then leg number four is the prescription longevity drugs, the drugs that are coming directly, Chuck, out of human longevity science, things like rapamycin or acarbose that have been proven to extend lifespan by up to 14% in every mammal species studied to date.
Um, I'm a loss of words and just kind of dumbfounded on that, especially about the glucosamine because we've heard so much information on that. Not like I said, not only for humans but pets, and now you're
Yeah.
saying pretty much everything I learn is n-
Listen,
not
I drank the Kool-Aid back in the day, Chuck. I sold glucosamine and chondroitin products like Cosequin or Dasequin for 20 years in my practices. But beginning about 7 years ago, there's just been study after study after study, Chuck, that tells us that they are no better than placebo in reducing pain and inflammation in our joints or in the joints of our pets. And so let me be clear, I can think of four different products that offer really good help to pets or to humans with painful joints, but glucosamine and chondroitin is not one of them.
okay. Okay. Can I like to ask you a seemingly dumb and dangerous question at the same time. And that is, so how often and do I really need to go see a vet?
Okay. No, that's absolutely. And listen, I want your listeners to understand, Chuck. I've been in veterinary practice for 40 years. I graduated back in 1986, before you were born, Chuck. But what I would tell you right now is that I think the veterinary world is broken as an industry. And I can go into that in some detail. And so I think that if you're a conscientious pet parent, we should rethink exactly when and why your dog or your cat goes to the veterinarian. When I graduated from school way back when, Chuck, I was told that every pet needed every vaccine once a year to protect their health. And now, in retrospect, I realized that that was really designed to protect the financial health of us poor, lonely veterinarians as opposed to the pets in our care. Because one of the things that cat parents should understand is that every time I give a cat, every time I puncture a cat's skin with a needle as part of a vaccine protocol, I'm increasing the risk of skin cancer at that site dramatically. And so, as an example, if you had a cat, Chuck, and you brought that cat to me as your veterinarian, and I were to give that cat, you wanted me to give that cat a rabies vaccine, in the old days, I just used the scruff of the neck right here over the shoulders because that was easy on a cat, not too many nerves, lots of skin up there, so it was easy on the vet. I mean, life was good. But now, Chuck, the veterinary medical associations are recommending is that when you and I vaccinate a cat, we vaccinate as low down on their legs, as close to their paws as possible. Why is
Oh,
that, Chuck? Why is that? It's
fewer
because
blood vessels?
if they develop skin cancer at the site of injection, it's easier to amputate a leg than to deal with skin cancer up here. That's the
Okay.
only reason for it, Chuck. And so, listen, I am a believer in vaccines, and I can talk more about that in just 1 second. I am in no way, shape, or form an anti vaxxer. But I believe that when you and I think about vaccinating a pet, we damn sure, Chuck, ought to know why we're vaccinating. Does your is your pet exposed to these risks? And if so, let's vaccinate the heck out of them. But if they aren't exposed to these risks, Chuck, it's malpractice to vaccinate them. It's doing nothing but increasing your veterinary expense. And so, that's one of the examples that I would use when you come to when you ask about how often you should take a pet to the vet is vaccinations. Now I'm going to touch on two things more quickly, and then I'll stand down on my soapbox, Chuck. One is that if you have a dog under 25 pounds or a cat, after about the age of 5, Chuck, they should be having yearly anesthetic dentals. Why anesthetic dentals? Because you and I need x rays of every tooth in our body as part of a comprehensive dental cleaning, and so do our pets. But the difference is you and I might lean back in a chair, Chuck, and hold an x ray plate in our mouth for the 10 seconds or whatever that is required. Pets don't do that. So we need to anesthetize them so that then a veterinarian like me can place an X-ray sensor in their mouth and get a good picture of their teeth. So that's one component of this, and that's much more small dog and cat issue than for large breed dogs. But the second component is as the dogs and cats age, we all need blood tests, Jack. We all need urine tests. You no different than me, and me no different than the pets in my care. So that was kind of a long-winded way, but a long-winded discussion, I should say. But in general, veterinary care, in my mind, relies upon judicious use of vaccines, dental care, and appropriate diagnostics for your pets. That's really the big three.
I'll say this. I believe in the vaccination for dogs too, but I follow what you said because my dog is here in the yard just with me. He doesn't go to parks, run freely. I don't get certain vaccinations and things where they say, "Oh, parvo this or whatever it might be for dogs," because you're going to
Mhm.
be around 1,000 dogs. Like my dog's around 3 dogs, maybe,
Right.
maybe.
You're
And those
exactly
three,
correct, Chuck. You're exactly correct. And let me mention just a couple more things, and
yeah.
feel free to edit this out if you choose, because I'm passionate about this stuff, Chuck. This stuff counts because not only will it save you money or at least allow you to better understand your expenses, but it also is better health care for your pets. So one of the things that I would mention is that I went through, I'm old enough to have gone through the original parvo outbreak in dogs, Chuck, back in the late 1980s. And let me tell you this, every dog that got parvo back then died. It was the dog apocalypse. And so, in no way, shape, or form am I saying your pet should not get vaccines. But again, I'm just asking you to pick and to think about those vaccines based on your pet's lifestyle risks. The current example is the dog flu vaccine. And I would bet you a six pack of beer, Chuck, that the last time you took your dog into your veterinarian for vaccines, they said, "Hey, Chuck, you need to give your dog a flu vaccine." Well, guess what? In 2025, Chuck, guess how many cases of dog flu there were in the United States? I'm going to steal my own thunder and say there were 11.
Oh,
11 cases of flu in dogs in the continental United States. Six of those were in California, four of those were in Georgia, and one was in North Carolina. Do you know how many dogs died from flu last year, Chuck? Zero. Not one of
wow.
those dogs died. So why are you with your dog in relative isolation being told that you need to vaccinate your dog against flu? The only logical reason is that your veterinarian and the vaccine manufacturer tend to make money from that, Chuck. And that just bugs the hell out of me.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're giving depth and clarification to a lot of this stuff. I do want to add one thing about, like I said, the needle poking our furry pals too often. I have become very leery, very afraid of doing a fine needle aspirus on the dog for
Yeah.
looking at something. The reason I say this is two of my dogs, after doing a fine needle aspirus, one of them, well, they both came back negative. However, um, the one that they said negative, 3 months later, there was a growth on him that was about the size of a silver dollar. 8 months later, 18 inches in diameter,
Mm,
cancer. So
yeah.
from what I understand is they aggravated something, poked, and there's a cancer cell, and on the way out, maybe something dripped out, and the dog
Yeah,
got cancer.
it can happen. Um,
It
and so,
just
yeah, so I'm sure it's very frustrating for you. I
it was.
and so this is going to be an example, Chuck, where two you're a smart guy. I'm a schmo veterinarian, but I might disagree with you, and we can disagree and still be friends, which is a little bit unusual in today's society. And listen, I'm going to tell you that there are two disadvantages to fine needle aspirates, and you touched on one of them, Chuck. One is the fact that in theory, if you have a closed little tumor, and you and I poke a hole into that tumor and then pull the needle back out, in theory, tumor cells can get into surrounding tissue. You're absolutely correct about that. The second concern your pet parents should have is that you and I use the smallest needle possible because hell, we don't want to hurt the pets that we're trying to help. But sometimes that needle is so small that it misses the actual tumor. In other words, if you have a
Mm.
cluster of 100 cells or 500 tumor cells and your very small needle slides in right alongside that, you may not find any tumor cells in your aspirate sample. And they were there, it's just that you missed them by not doing a big enough sample. So those are the two downsides, Chuck, of doing fine needle aspirates. But I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to take a little different stand, and you and I can disagree and still be friends. And that is that I would tell you that for humans or for pets, the earlier the diagnosis we can get of potential cancer, the better our cancer care will be and the longer our pets will live. So there's a bunch of work. There are billions of dollars, Chuck, with a B. That's billions of dollars being spent in the human medical field about drawing our blood for early cancer diagnostics. And that's the way of the future. So that you and I, we go in once a year, they draw our blood and not just check our kidney or our liver function, but they also tell us, nope, you don't have any cancer. Or yes, you do have cancer, but it's early in the game and this is what you can do. So that's kind of the future, I think, in both human and veterinary medicine. But in the meantime, until that occurs, I'm going to take my best shot with a fine needle aspirate.
I'm glad that you're saying that and explaining certain things because I think this goes along with part of your thing is about early detection, and
Hmm.
that's what this is. It's early detection, for better or for worse for me. But early detection is better, and is the best. Kind of like the saying goes, when you have to, unfortunately, come to the time when you have to put your dog down. It's better a day early than a week too late, is what I've heard. So,
Yeah, yeah, and I think that early detection is gives us a huge advantage, Chuck, and that's why I'll circle back around to making the recommendation about those yearly blood tests, those yearly urine tests, and yes, including early cancer detection if you have a dog like mine who is prone to those to cancer as a disease. Absolutely.
uh, how do you feel about pet insurance?
Well, listen, I mean, I think the best form of pet insurance, Chuck, would be if you and I, we lived together and we had the Kevin and Chuck, if we had Annabelle and your dog living there, would be for you and me to put 200 bucks a month into a savings account or into a CD account that was specifically geared towards the health needs of our pets. And over time, we just draw from that as we run into an issue. Because the one thing that's different there is that if you and I put $200 into a savings account, we know darn well that it's there. Whereas if you are spending $200 a month, which is not all that unusual on pet insurance, Chuck, and you don't use it, that money is gone just as surely as you and I held a match to two $100 bills. And so how many people, including me, to be honest with you, have the wherewithal or the resolve to put $200 in a month for our pets? Well, I probably don't, to be honest with you. But if you are going to choose a pet insurance plan, Chuck, instead of putting $200 a month or whatever your budget will allow into a savings account for your pet, there are two different things you should understand. One is the fact that pre existing conditions, Chuck, are every bit as big a nuisance in dogs or in cats as they are in humans. And so, one of my late grandmother's best friends was an insurance agent, and he always advocated setting up an insurance policy early in your life. Why? Not because you needed it, but because you were insuring your insurability, Chuck.
Mm-hmm.
And that same thing applies to your pets. If you have a breed like pit bulls or German shepherds or dachshunds or some of these other breeds that are very prone to health issues, you want to start their insurance program as early in the game as is financially feasible for you to avoid the fear of running into pre-existing conditions that might limit your pet's insurability down the road. And the second component to this is that if you, Chuck, have a dog or a cat, a small dog under 25 pounds, again, or a cat, I'm going to tell you that you will spend $1,000 to $1,500 on their dental care each year. So if you have that small dog or cat, or if your listeners have that small dog or cat, please make sure that excuse me, let me try that again, Chuck. Make sure that your pet's insurance includes dental coverage because not
Yes.
all of them do. And if they don't, Chuck, they are neglecting probably the single biggest expense that you, as the parent of a small dog or a cat, will have on an annual basis.
And I'll say, ain't that the truth? Because I know some friends who had taken in their little, 4-pound dog, and it was just crazy for those tiny teeth to get them fixed. And unfortunately, I don't know if this is true, but it seems like that I've heard more often that little dogs with those tiny teeth get rotten teeth a lot quicker than the bigger dogs.
Yes,
But I
sir.
don't know if that's true.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, and that's why I say, I mean, if if you have a dog who's 25 pounds, 30 pounds, or and over, you probably, I mean, you may need to clean their teeth once, maybe twice during their whole life, Chuck. But if you have a smaller dog, that 10-pound Chihuahua, that 4-pound poodle, they need their dental. Let me try that again. They need their teeth cleaned under anesthesia on an annual basis, at least, and sometimes more frequently, Chuck. So you're exactly correct.
Hmm. Well, um, folks, if you're going to be a pet owner, you got to seriously be a pet owner and not just do it because you think it's cute and fun, because this is really taking care of a life. And that's exactly what it is. And, I said it at the top of the hour, it's a family member, and you need to treat your little furry loved one as a family member. And that's going to cost you.
And occasionally it will. But you know what? That's a great investment. They're going to give you
Oh,
lots of
yeah.
love along the way. There study after study, Chuck, that shows that people who live in isolation die younger than those that have pets. And the reason for that is simple. Pets bring so much to our lives. And so, yeah, I understand the expense, but the reality is that, I have a girlfriend and she's a little bit of an expense every once in a while too, but she brings an awful lot to my life. And so I'm happy to have her there, and I think we're all happy to have our pets there as well.
Yeah, 100% agree on that. Uh, I think for me, one of the last questions that I have is really about breeds, being breed specific on pets, and how health for breeds of dogs differ, and how maybe lifestyle and how the science of all this may differ. Is there a great difference between breeds? Not
There
necessarily
really
so.
is. There
Okay.
really is, Chuck. And let me just give you a couple of examples, and I'll try to speak in more concisely than I have in some others. But there are breeds like golden retrievers that are very prone to cancer. There
Hmm.
are breeds like Doberman Pinschers that are very prone to heart disease. There are breeds like Dachshunds and Corgis that are very prone to spinal problems. And so, one of the ways that you can help your pet live longer is to understand what their risks are. So, I mentioned cancer prevention and my dog Annabelle as a golden retriever. If your listeners, Chuck, have a Dachshund or a Corgi, they need to understand that every time they go up and down the stairs, they are potentially shortening their life because so many of these long wheelbase dogs, Chuck, herniate a disc in their spine, and that causes paralysis. And so, if your Chihuahua, excuse me, let me try that again. If your Dachshund or if your corgi is running up and down the stairs all day long, or jumping into and out of the car, or onto or off of the furniture, the unfortunate truth is that I will bet you a 6 pack of beer that sooner or later they're going to herniate a disc. And there is nothing more devastating than having a dog walking in the morning and paralyzed in the afternoon.
Mm. Um, you just kind of opened my or enlighten me, I'll say, for one of the things that I done for my other dogs, and this one in particular, he's a Lhasa Apso, or sorry, the other one that passed was a Lhasa Apso. This guy is a Maltipoo, so he is a little bit smaller. I do have two flights of stairs, constantly going up and down, up and down. Um,
Yeah, and so
I
let me give you 3 ways, Chuck, that you can help keep your dog healthy for as long as possible. One is the
okay.
dental care that we've already talked about. Please, I mean, after age 5, spend the money needed to take them in, get an anesthetic dental cleaning with X-rays of every tooth. And I want to be clear about this. Some veterinarians don't take X-rays of your dog's teeth under a dental procedure, and the Latin word for that, Chuck, is malpractice. That's
Mm,
wrong. You need to make sure that your veterinarian is taking pictures of every tooth in your dog's body. Secondly, get a set of little stairs for them to get onto and off of your bed or onto and off of the sofa so that they're not jumping up and jumping down. And then third, please get just a child's gate. Just you go down to Walmart or Aldi or whatever, buy a child's gate and put it at the top or put it at the bottom of the stairs so that They can still go up and down the stairs, Chuck, but let's limit them to once or twice a day, not the 10 or 20 times a day. And I will guarantee you that if you do those three things alone, without making any other changes or without spending $100 a month on fancy drugs from me, your dogs will live longer.
I was gonna say what I do with my dog. I give really good massage, back massage.
Attaboy,
I've been
attaboy.
told. So, my dog, I give him, I call it a spinal rub, and I can tell. This is just me. It might sound crazy. I could tell if there's something pinched there. There's like a lump, and I can smooth it out, rub it out.
Okay,
My dog's ears just go up, and he's just like loving it. He's just like, "Oh,
sure.
don't stop." And I know the right amount of pressure, and he kind of tells me too. If he wants more, he kind of pushes back on it. I'm like, "All right."
All right.
I, is it crazy, or I mean, am I
No,
doing
no.
something?
I mean, you're doing two things, Chuck. You're making him feel better, and I will tell you that if he runs into a spinal problem, you'll feel him flinch away from you. You'll feel him clench his muscles. But also, I mean, that's part of bonding, baby. Who doesn't want to be massaged? And so, you're being a great dog dad, and my hat's off to you.
Thank you very much, and he thanks all of us. Uh, Dr. Kevin, I know there's so much more that we could talk about, but I want to say this has been fantastic, and I just want to leave you with the opportunity. If there's anything that you need to uh, let us be aware of, as far as books and things like that, again, please let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, Chuck, I do have a book that just got introduced. It's called the Pet Longevity Playbook, and you can find it on our website. But the reality is that on that website, and my primary website is helpingpetslivelonger.com, you can find free reports. You can find the best in supplements. I only carry 16 or 17 supplements, Chuck, but I know exactly why they're there, and I know which dogs will benefit from them and which dogs won't. I carry prescription longevity drugs, but above all else, I do consults, Chuck. I will take great care of your listeners' pets via telemedicine consults. And so if that resonates with them, please reach out to me at helpingpetslivelonger.com, or let's take a shortcut. Hit www.freevetcall.com, and I'd be honored to visit with any of your listeners at no charge to see if you and I can sit down and develop a longevity strategy to help maximize your dog's life. We are all in this together, Chuck.
We are, we are. Thank you very much. This has been really, really good. So thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate the opportunity.